The text message glowed on my phone screen like a neon sign advertising my wife's betrayal. Weekend getaway with Brandon. Don't wait up. I stared at those words for a full minute, sitting in my garage workshop at 2 a.m, grease still under my fingernails from fixing Mrs. Peterson's transmission. 22 years of marriage, and this is how Carla tells me she's screwing her law firm's junior partner. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Didn't plan to. I typed back, then set the phone down next to my wrench set. My name's Nick Castellano, and I fix things for a living. Cars, mostly, but also lawnmowers, generators, anything with an engine that people can't figure out themselves. I'm good with my hands, patient with problems, and I don't give up easily. These skills, as it turns out, apply to more than just mechanical work. The house felt different when I walked inside. Everything looked the same: Carla's designer throw pillows on the couch, her expensive coffee maker on the granite countertop she'd insisted we needed, family photos from better times. But it all felt like stage props in someone else's play. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, thinking. Carla probably expected me to rage, to call her crying, to beg her to come home. That's what the old Nick might have done. But sitting there in the pre-dawn quiet, I felt something else entirely. Clarity. By sunrise, I'd changed every lock in the house. By noon, I'd packed all of Carla's clothes into boxes and loaded them into my pickup truck. By 2 o'clock, I was standing outside Brandon Matthews' fancy downtown apartment building, stacking those boxes in the lobby with a note taped to the top one. Your girlfriend's stuff. Congratulations on the upgrade. The doorman, a tired-looking guy in his 50s, watched me work. Moving day? He asked. Something like that, I said. Tell Mr. Matthews in 14B that his new roommate's belongings are here. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. My phone buzzed with calls from Carla, but I let them go to voicemail. I had work to do. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a beer, looking out at the lake behind our house. Our house. My house now. The water was calm, reflecting the orange sunset like a mirror. Peaceful. I could get used to this. My phone rang again. This time it was my daughter, Kayla, calling from college. Dad, what's going on? Mom's been texting me all day, crying about locks and boxes. Your mother decided to take an extended vacation with her boyfriend, I said. I decided to redecorate. Dad, come on. You can't just kick her out. This is crazy. Crazy would be pretending everything's fine while she's playing house with some lawyer half her age. I prefer honest. Kayla sighed. Look, I know Mom screwed up, but you guys need to work this out like adults. I am working it out, sweetheart. Very adult-like, very methodically. After we hung up, I sat there thinking about Brandon Matthews. I'd met him exactly once, at the law firm's Christmas party 2 years ago. Slick hair, expensive suit, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He'd shaken my hand with the limp grip of someone who'd never done real work, then spent the rest of the evening talking about his BMW and his weekend house in the mountains. What does he do exactly? I'd asked Carla on the drive home. Corporate law, mostly. He's very successful for his age. Successful at what? Looking good in a suit? She'd given me that look, the one that said I was being small and petty and embarrassing. I'd learned to recognize that look over the years. I'd also learned to hate it. Now, sitting on my porch, I wondered if she'd been screwing him even then. Probably. The signs had been there. The late nights at the office, the new interest in expensive lingerie, the way she'd started pronouncing certain words differently, like she was trying on a new personality along with her designer clothes. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your wife's at the Riverside Motel on Route 9. Thought you should know. A friend. I stared at the message. Someone was watching. Someone who knew what was happening and wanted me to know too. In a town like ours, that could be anyone. Secrets don't keep well in small places. I finished my beer and went inside. Tomorrow was Monday. Carla would have to face the music eventually, and when she did, I planned to be ready with the whole orchestra. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that makes everything look tired. I was in my garage by 7, working on a transmission rebuild, when I heard Carla's car pull into the driveway. She tried her key first, of course. I listened to the frustrated jiggling of metal against metal, then the electronic beep of her keycard failing against the new smart lock I'd installed. Through the window, I watched her face cycle through confusion, anger, and something that might have been fear. She pounded on the door. Nick, open this door right now. I kept working, tightening bolts with methodical precision. The transmission was a beautiful thing, really. Every gear had its place. Every component served a purpose. When something broke, you fixed it or replaced it. Simple. I know you're in there, Nick. This is my house, too. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked to the front door. Through the glass, Carla looked smaller than I remembered. Her designer jacket wrinkled, her usually perfect hair showing gray roots she'd normally never let anyone see. How was your weekend getaway? I called through the door. Open the door and we'll talk about it. I think we can talk just fine like this. How's Brandon? Did he enjoy the Riverside Motel? I hear they have those vibrating beds you put quarters in. Her face went white. Someone's been watching us. Honey, in this town, everyone's watching everyone. You should know that by now. I held up a box, the last of her things I'd found, stuff from the bathroom medicine cabinet. Your boyfriend's probably wondering where his toothbrush went. It's in here with your birth control pills, you know, the ones you told me you stopped taking because we were trying for another baby. She started crying then, the kind of ugly crying that ruins makeup and makes your nose run. Nick, please, I made a mistake. I was confused. I was going through something. Yeah, you were going through Brandon Matthews. Repeatedly, from what I hear. Don't be cruel. Cruel? I laughed, and even I was surprised by how bitter it sounded. Cruel is lying to your husband for months. Cruel is making him think there's something wrong with him when you're just busy screwing someone else. Cruel is that little winky face in your text message, like this was all some fun game. I set the box down outside the door. Your stuff's at Brandon's, your car's in the driveway, your husband's done pretending he doesn't know what you've been up to. Where am I supposed to go? I hear Brandon's got a nice place downtown, 2 bedrooms, granite countertops, all the amenities. Should be perfect for you two lovebirds. She picked up the box with shaking hands. This isn't over, Nick. Yeah, it is. I watched her drive away, then went back to my transmission. But I couldn't concentrate. The phone started ringing around 10. Her friends, her sister, even her mother calling to tell me what a bastard I was being. I let them all go to voicemail. Around noon, my buddy Marty showed up with sandwiches from the deli. Heard you had some excitement this morning, he said, settling onto a workbench with his lunch. Marty owned the Last Hand, the bar where half the town went to drink and the other half went to gossip. He'd been a cop for 15 years before he got tired of dealing with other people's problems and decided to just listen to them instead. News travels fast, I said. Faster when it involves the mayor's daughter and her fancy lawyer boyfriend getting caught at a no-tell motel. I looked up from my sandwich. The mayor's daughter? You didn't know? Carla's been telling everyone she's related to his honor. Distant cousin or something. Been dropping his name around town, acting like she's got connections. This was news to me. In 22 years of marriage, Carla had never mentioned being related to Mayor Davidson. Then again, there were apparently a lot of things she'd never mentioned. She's been busy reinventing herself, I said. Yeah, well, her reinvention just hit a speed bump. Word is, her boss ain't too happy about the drama. Law firms don't like their partners' personal lives making the rounds at the coffee shop. I finished my sandwich, thinking, what else are people saying? That you're handling this better than most men would, that you've got class, that Brandon Matthews is a piece of shit who had it coming. And what does Brandon think about all this? Marty grinned. Why don't you ask him yourself? He's been holding court at Murphy's Pub all morning, telling anyone who'll listen how you're crazy and dangerous and how he's going to sue you for harassment. Murphy's Pub was across town, the kind of place that served overpriced cocktails to people who thought they were too good for places like the Last Hand. It figured that Brandon would run there to lick his wounds. Harassment, huh? That's what he's calling it. Says you threatened him. I haven't even talked to the guy. Don't let facts get in the way of a good story, Nick. He's scared, so he's trying to get ahead of whatever he thinks you might do next. I spent the afternoon thinking about that. What was I going to do next? The old Nick would have probably drunk himself stupid and waited for Carla to come crawling back. But the old Nick had been operating under the assumption that his wife loved him, that his marriage meant something, that the life he'd built had some kind of foundation. The new Nick was working without those assumptions. Around 5 o'clock, I drove over to Brandon's apartment building. His BMW was in the parking garage, and I could see lights on in his 14th floor window. I sat in my truck for a while, just watching, thinking about the man up there who'd been screwing my wife. Then I got out and walked over to his car. The BMW was beautiful, I had to admit. Pristine paint job, leather interior, the kind of car that cost more than most people made in a year. Brandon probably spent more on car payments than I spent on groceries. I walked around it slowly, admiring the craftsmanship. German engineering at its finest. It would be a shame if something happened to it. I pulled out my phone and took a few pictures, then got back in my truck and drove home. But I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat on my porch with another beer, looking at those photos and thinking about German engineering and how even the best-made things could break if you knew where to apply pressure. My phone buzzed with a text from Kayla. "Mom says you're having a breakdown. She's worried about you." "Tell your mother I'm fine," I texted back. "Better than fine, actually. I'm focused." That night, I lay in bed, in my house, and listened to the quiet. No Carla tossing and turning, no late-night phone calls she claimed were work emergencies, no lying next to someone who was thinking about someone else. For the first time in months, I slept like a baby. Tuesday morning brought sunshine and clarity. I had a plan now, and plans made everything simpler. I drove to the auto parts store and bought a few things. Nothing dramatic, just some basic supplies that any mechanic might need. Then I stopped by the hardware store for a small bottle of fish sauce from their oddly comprehensive grocery section. The clerk, a kid named Tommy who'd graduated high school with Kayla, gave me a curious look. "Making Thai food, Mr. Castellano?" "Something like that," I said. Brandon's BMW was still in the parking garage when I arrived at his building around 10. The security cameras were positioned to watch the entrances, not the parking spots, and the garage was dimly lit. Perfect for someone who needed to do a little maintenance work without an audience. I popped the hood and got to work. Nothing permanent, nothing that would cause an accident. I'm not a monster. Just a few small adjustments that would make his Tuesday more interesting than he'd planned. The fish sauce went into the air conditioning intake. Just a few drops, enough to make the interior smell like a seafood restaurant's dumpster on a hot day. The rest of my work was more technical, a loose wire here, a disconnected hose there, the kind of problems that would leave the car running rough and smoking, but not actually dangerous. I was closing the hood when I heard footsteps, a woman's voice, familiar and getting closer. Told him I needed space to think, but really I just needed space to figure out how to handle Nick. Carla. She was coming down the stairs with someone, their voices echoing in the concrete garage. I ducked behind a concrete pillar and listened. "He's not going to just roll over and take this," said another woman's voice. "Lily Brennan, Carla's best friend since college. You know how stubborn he is." "He's not stubborn, he's simple," Carla said. "He fixes cars and drinks beer and watches football. He doesn't have the imagination for real revenge." "I don't know, Carla. Changing the locks, moving your stuff out, that took some planning. That was just anger. He'll cool down, and then we can work out a settlement. The house is worth $400,000, and there's his business, his retirement account. I'll be fine." They stopped next to Brandon's car. Carla had a key, I noticed. Already playing house. "What about Brandon? Is he ready for all this drama?" "Brandon's a lawyer. He knows how these things work. We'll file for divorce, claim irreconcilable differences, split everything 50-50. Nick won't fight it. He's too proud to air our dirty laundry in court." Lily laughed. "You've got it all figured out, don't you?" "I've been planning this for months. The only surprise was getting caught at that motel, but honestly, it's better this way. Now I don't have to pretend anymore." They got in the car and drove away, leaving me crouched behind a concrete pillar with my blood pressure through the roof. Months of planning. She'd been strategizing my humiliation while I was fixing her coffee in the morning and asking about her day. I walked back to my truck on unsteady legs. The old Nick would have been devastated by what he'd just heard. The new Nick was taking notes. I drove to the Last Hand and found Marty restocking the bar for the lunch crowd. "You look like hell," he said. "What happened?" I told him about the conversation in the garage. He listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking his head. "Months of planning," he said when I finished. "That's cold, even for Carla. She thinks I'm too simple for real revenge." "Are you?" I thought about that. "I don't know. I've never tried real revenge before." Marty poured 2 shots of whiskey and slid one across the bar. "What do you know about Brandon Matthews?" "Rich kid, fancy lawyer, drives a BMW that's about to need some serious mechanical work." "I mean really know. His background, his weaknesses, the kind of stuff that might be useful if a person was planning something." I knocked back the whiskey. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying that information is power, and right now they have all the information about you while you don't know shit about them." He had a point. I'd been married to Carla for over 2 decades, but apparently I didn't know her at all, and Brandon was a complete mystery, just a smug face in an expensive suit. How would someone go about getting that kind of information? Hypothetically, small town like this, everyone knows everyone's business. You just have to know who to ask and how to ask it. I spent the afternoon making calls, not to lawyers or private investigators, but to people who actually knew things. The mechanic who serviced Brandon's car, the bartender at Murphy's Pub, the woman who cleaned offices downtown, the mailman who'd been delivering to the same routes for 30 years. By evening, I had a clearer picture of Brandon Matthews, trust fund baby who'd never worked a real job, law degree from a second-tier school that Daddy's money had bought, junior partner at the firm not because of his legal skills, but because his family had connections. Currently 3 months behind on his car payments and 2 months behind on his rent. The golden boy wasn't quite as golden as he appeared. I also learned some interesting things about Carla's job. The law firm was struggling, had been for months. Several partners had left recently, taking clients with them. There were rumors about financial irregularities, questions about missing client funds, and Carla, it seemed, had been in charge of the client entertainment budget. I sat in my kitchen that night, making lists and connections, feeling like a detective in one of those noir movies Carla used to hate. She preferred romantic comedies, stories where everything worked out neat and clean in the end. This wasn't going to be one of those stories. My phone rang around 10. Unknown number, again. Mr. Castellano? This is Detective Willis with the city police. We've had a complaint about harassment and vandalism. Could you come down to the station tomorrow morning to discuss it? What kind of complaint? Mr. Matthews says you've been threatening him and his property. Says his car was tampered with today. I smiled. Brandon's BMW must have provided quite a show when he tried to drive it. I'll be there at 9, I said. Should I bring a lawyer? That's up to you, sir. This is just a preliminary conversation. After he hung up, I poured myself a drink and went out to the porch. The lake was dark and still, like black glass. Somewhere out there, a loon called, its voice echoing across the water. I'd never been in trouble with the police before, never even had a speeding ticket, but I wasn't worried. They'd have to prove I'd done something to Brandon's car, and I'd been very careful not to leave evidence. Besides, I was just getting started. Detective Willis turned out to be a reasonable man in his 50s who looked like he'd rather be fishing than dealing with domestic drama. We sat in a small interview room that smelled like coffee and disinfectant while he read from a file. Mr. Matthews says you've been harassing him and his girlfriend. Your wife, I understand? Soon-to-be ex-wife, I corrected. And I haven't harassed anyone. I changed the locks on my own house and moved my wife's belongings to her boyfriend's apartment. Last I checked, that wasn't illegal. What about his car? He says someone tampered with it yesterday, made it smoke and smell bad. His car had problems? That's unfortunate. German cars can be temperamental. Willis gave me a look that said he'd been doing this job long enough to recognize bullshit when he heard it. Mr. Castellano, I'm going to give you some advice. Whatever you're thinking about doing, don't. Divorce is messy enough without criminal charges getting involved. I appreciate the advice, Detective, but I'm not planning to do anything illegal. Good, because Mr. Matthews seems pretty rattled. He's talking about restraining orders, civil suits, the whole 9 yards. You don't want that kind of trouble. I left the police station feeling oddly cheerful. Brandon was scared enough to call the cops over a few minor car problems. That suggested a man who wasn't used to real adversity, someone who'd spent his whole life having problems solved by other people. Those kinds of people broke easily when you applied the right pressure. I spent the rest of the week being a model citizen. I worked on cars, paid my bills, had dinner with my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, when she brought over a casserole and wanted to gossip about Carla's situation. I was polite, reasonable, and completely boring, but I was also watching and learning. Brandon's patterns, his routines, his weaknesses. The man was a creature of habit. Murphy's Pub for lunch, the gym at 6, dinner at expensive restaurants with Carla playing the role of sophisticated girlfriend. Friday evening, I decided it was time to expand my social circle. The last hand was packed when I arrived, the usual crowd of mechanics and factory workers and retired cops blowing off steam after a long week. But there were also some new faces, people I recognized from around town but had never really talked to. "Nick," Marty called from behind the bar, "come settle an argument. Tommy here says you can rebuild a transmission blindfolded." Tommy Martinez worked at the Ford dealership and had been sending me overflow work for years. Good kid, honest mechanic, the kind of guy who'd never cheat a customer. "Not blindfolded," I said, accepting the beer Marty offered. "But I could probably do it drunk." "Speaking of which," said a voice behind me, "maybe you should slow down on the drinking. Wouldn't want you to do something stupid." I turned around and found myself face to face with Dave Brennan, Lily's husband and one of my oldest friends. We'd known each other since high school, had been each other's best man, had coached our kids' Little League teams together. The emphasis was on had been. "Dave," I said evenly. "How's Lily?" "She's fine. Worried about Carla, but fine." "Worried about what, exactly?" Dave stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Look, Nick, I get it. You're hurt, you're angry, but you're handling this all wrong. Carla made a mistake, but she's still family. You can't just throw away 20 years of marriage because of one bad decision. One bad decision? I laughed. Dave, she's been planning this for months. She's already talking about splitting up my assets and moving in with her boyfriend permanently. This isn't a mistake. It's a hostile takeover. That's not what Lily says. Lily wasn't hiding in a parking garage listening to them plan my financial destruction. Dave's face went red. You were spying on them. I was fixing a car and happened to overhear a conversation. There's a difference. Jesus, Nick. Do you hear yourself? You're turning into some kind of paranoid stalker. The bar had gone quiet around us. I could feel people listening, watching, waiting to see how this would play out. A stalker, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm a stalker because I found out my wife was cheating on me and decided not to pretend it wasn't happening. You're a stalker because you can't let it go, because you're making everyone choose sides in your personal drama. I didn't make anyone choose anything. I just stopped lying about what was happening in my own marriage. Dave looked around the bar, realizing he'd picked a fight he couldn't win in front of this particular crowd. These were working people, folks who understood loyalty and honesty and the value of keeping your word. This isn't over, he said, echoing his wife's earlier threat. Yeah, it is, I replied, echoing my own. He left, and the normal bar conversation gradually resumed. But something had changed. Lines had been drawn, sides had been chosen, and I was no longer the only person in town who knew what Carla and Brandon had been up to. Marty refilled my beer without being asked. Well, that was interesting. Dave's always been an idiot, said Tommy. Remember in high school when he tried to ask out 3 different girls for prom? Some people never learn, agreed Mrs. Patterson, the retired teacher who came in every Friday for fish and chips. They think they can have everything without consequences. I stayed until closing time, listening to people talk, letting the conversation flow around me like water around a stone. By the time I left, half the bar knew the whole story. Not just about Carla's affair, but about her plans to take half of everything I'd worked for, about Brandon's family money and legal connections, about the way they'd been laughing about my supposed simplicity. Small towns are like that. Information spreads like wildfire, and once it spreads, it takes on a life of its own. Saturday morning, I woke up to find my driveway blocked by Carla's car. She was sitting on my front steps, still in the same clothes she'd been wearing the night before, mascara smeared, looking like she'd been crying for hours. We need to talk, she said when I opened the door. I thought we already talked. You're screwing Brandon. You want a divorce. You think I'm too simple to stop you from taking half my stuff. What else is there to say? People are talking, Nick, saying horrible things about me, about Brandon. You have to make it stop. I have to make it stop? You know how this town works. One word from you, and people will mind their own business again. I sat down on the step next to her, close enough to smell the expensive perfume she'd started wearing lately. Carla, I didn't make you cheat on me. I didn't make you plan this whole thing behind my back. I didn't make you think I was too stupid to figure out what was happening. You did all that yourself. I never said you were stupid. No, you said I was simple, that I didn't have the imagination for real revenge, that I'd just roll over and let you take whatever you wanted. She looked at me with something like fear in her eyes. You heard that? I hear a lot of things these days. It's amazing what people will say when they think nobody's listening. What do you want, Nick? Money? The house? Just tell me what it'll take to end this. I stood up, brushing dust off my jeans. I want you to understand something, Carla. This isn't about money or property or who gets what in the divorce. This is about 22 years of marriage that you threw away like garbage. This is about lying to my face every morning while you were planning to destroy everything we built together. I never meant for it to happen this way. Yeah, you did. You planned it for months, remember? The only thing you didn't plan was getting caught. I walked back toward the house, then stopped and turned around. You want to know what I want? I want you to feel what I felt when I read that text message. I want you to know what it's like when everyone in town is talking about your personal business. I want you and Brandon to understand that actions have consequences, even for people who think they're too smart and too connected to face them. You're scaring me, Nick. Good. Maybe now you'll understand how serious this is. I went inside and locked the door, leaving her sitting on the steps. Through the window, I watched her sit there for another hour, crying and making phone calls, before she finally gave up and drove away. The game was just getting started. Sunday evening, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Brandon Matthews directly. We need to talk, I said when he answered. I have nothing to say to you, and my lawyer says, your lawyer can come too if you want. But this conversation is happening, one way or another. You can meet me somewhere public and civilized, or you can keep hiding behind other people while I make your life increasingly complicated. There was a long pause. What do you want? One conversation, face to face, man to man. Fine. Murphy's Pub, tomorrow at 7. And I'm bringing witnesses. Bring whoever you want. Monday evening, I walked into Murphy's Pub wearing my best shirt and cleanest jeans. The place was exactly what I'd expected. Exposed brick walls, overpriced cocktails, the kind of atmosphere that made people feel sophisticated for drinking the same alcohol they could get anywhere else for half the price. Brandon was sitting at a corner table with 2 other men I didn't recognize. Lawyers, probably, based on their identical expensive suits and practiced expressions of bored superiority. "Nick," Brandon said as I approached. He didn't stand up or offer to shake hands. "These are my associates, Mr. Henley and Mr. Cross." "Gentlemen," I said, pulling out a chair and sitting down without being invited. "Thanks for coming to my little performance." "Performance?" Brandon looked confused. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table, screen facing up. "I've been recording this conversation since I walked in the door. Hope nobody minds." The lawyers exchanged glances. Henley, the older one, leaned forward. "Mr. Castellano, if you're planning to threaten or intimidate our client..." "I'm not planning to threaten anyone. I'm planning to make an offer." I looked directly at Brandon. "Here's the deal. You leave town. Tonight. Pack your stuff, break your lease, find a job somewhere else. Do that, and this all ends here." Brandon laughed, but it sounded forced. "You can't be serious. I'm not going anywhere because some jealous husband is having a midlife crisis." "Jealous?" I shook my head. "Brandon, I'm not jealous of you. I'm grateful to you." "Grateful?" "You showed me who my wife really was. You saved me from wasting any more years on a marriage that was already over. Hell, I should probably buy you a drink." I signaled the waitress and ordered a round for the table. The lawyers looked uncomfortable, like this wasn't going the way they'd expected. "But here's the thing," I continued. "Carla seems to think she can have her cake and eat it too. Keep screwing you, divorce me, take half my assets, and then live happily ever after with Daddy's trust fund baby. That's not going to happen." "You can't stop the divorce," Cross said, "and you can't stop them from being together." "You're right, but I can make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of people they're dealing with. I can make sure Carla's law firm knows about the missing client entertainment funds. I can make sure the state bar knows about Brandon's fake credentials. I can make sure the IRS knows about certain unreported income streams." Brandon went pale. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Tell me, Brandon, how much money has Carla been skimming from her firm's client account? And how much of that money has been paying for your fancy dinners and weekend getaways?" The silence stretched out for a long moment. Finally, Henley cleared his throat. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Castellano?" "Brandon leaves town. Tonight, Carla files for divorce, and we split our assets 50-50. The house, my business, everything we accumulated during the marriage. She keeps her mouth shut about harassment and stalking, and I keep my mouth shut about embezzlement and fraud." "And if we refuse?" Brandon asked. I smiled. "Then tomorrow morning, I start making phone calls. The State Bar Association, the IRS, your firm's managing partner, the local newspaper. By the end of the week, everyone in town will know that the Golden Boy lawyer and the mayor's cousin have been stealing money to fund their little love affair." I stood up and dropped a 20 on the table. "You've got until midnight to decide. After that, the offer expires, and things get much more complicated for everyone involved." I walked out of Murphy's Pub feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Behind me, I could hear angry voices and heated discussion, but I didn't look back. The next morning, I woke up to find Brandon's apartment building parking garage empty of BMWs. His mailbox had a forwarding address to somewhere in California. Carla called around noon, crying again, but this time it was different. This time she was scared. "He left," she said. "Brandon just packed up and left without saying goodbye." "Smart man," I said. "Smarter than I gave him credit for." "What did you do, Nick?" "I had a conversation. Very civilized, very adult. The kind of conversation you and I should have had months ago, before you decided to blow up our marriage. I want to come home." "This isn't your home anymore, Carla. It stopped being your home the minute you decided I was too simple to matter." 2 weeks later, the divorce papers were filed. Clean, simple, no-fault dissolution of marriage. We split everything 50-50, just like she'd originally planned, except now she was doing it alone instead of with her lawyer boyfriend. The law firm fired her quietly, citing budget cuts and restructuring. No criminal charges, no public scandal, just a discreet exit that let everyone save face. I kept the house and bought out her half of my business. She moved to the city, got a job with a smaller firm, started over somewhere nobody knew her story. 6 months later, I was sitting on my back porch with a beer, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and red. The phone rang, Kayla, calling from college. "Dad, I owe you an apology," she said. "I thought you were being cruel and vindictive. But Mom told me what really happened, what she'd been planning. I'm sorry I didn't believe you." "You don't owe me anything, sweetheart. You were trying to hold your family together. That's what good kids do. Are you okay? Really okay?" I looked out at the peaceful water, listened to the loons calling in the distance, felt the satisfaction of a job well done. "Yeah," I said. "I'm better than okay. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." After we hung up, I sat there thinking about revenge and justice and the difference between the two. I'd gotten my revenge, but more importantly, I'd gotten my life back. The house was quiet, but not empty. The future was uncertain, but not frightening. And somewhere in California, Brandon Matthews was probably still looking over his shoulder, wondering when the other shoe would drop. It wouldn't, of course. I'd meant what I said about ending it. But he didn't know that, and the not knowing was punishment enough. I finished my beer and went inside, turning off the lights one by one. Tomorrow I'd get back to work, fixing other people's problems, building something new from the pieces of something broken. But tonight, I was content to sit in my own house, in my own silence, knowing that I'd played the last hand and won.